Before we get started, plug in those earphones and get comfortable. Tonight, I've got 5 true highway horror stories that are going to seriously mess with your head. If you like what you hear, hit that like button and subscribe. Alright, let's jump right in. I do a lot of long-distance driving for work. I'm a freelance photographer, so I'm constantly traveling between cities for shoots, weddings, events, that sort of thing. I've driven through pretty much every state west of the Mississippi at this point, so I'm used to being on the road at weird hours. This particular night, I was driving from Portland down to Sacramento. It was around 11 p.m., and I had just crossed into Northern California on Interstate 5. If you've never driven that stretch, it's basically farmland and darkness for hours. You'll pass through these tiny towns every now and then, but for the most part, it's just you, the highway, and nothing else. I had been driving for about 3 hours when I realized I needed gas. My tank was sitting just above empty, and I didn't want to risk running out in the middle of nowhere. I saw a sign for a gas station at the next exit, one of those no-name places that's probably family-owned. I pulled off the highway and into this poorly lit parking lot. The station itself looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Faded paint, flickering fluorescent lights, the works. There was only one other car there, an old sedan parked near the air pump. I pulled up to one of the pumps and got out to start filling up. That's when I noticed him. There was a guy standing near the entrance of the convenience store, just standing there. He wasn't smoking or on his phone or anything. He was just staring in my direction. I figured maybe he was waiting for someone, so I didn't think much of it at first. But as I started pumping gas, I kept glancing over, and he hadn't moved. He was still just standing there, watching me. I tried to ignore it. I mean, it's a public place, right? Maybe he was just zoned out or something. But then, as I was finishing up, he started walking toward me. Not fast, but deliberately. And he was still staring. I quickly screwed the gas cap back on and got into my car, locking the doors immediately. The guy stopped about 10 feet away from my car and just stood there. I started the engine and pulled away from the pump, heading toward the exit. As I glanced in my rearview mirror, I saw him turn and walk back toward the store entrance. I got back on the highway and tried to shake off the weird feeling. I chalked it up to just being tired and paranoid. But about 20 minutes later, I noticed headlights behind me. They'd been there for a while, staying a consistent distance back. I didn't think much of it until I decided to test something. I slowed down a bit, and the car behind me slowed down too. Then I sped up, and they matched my speed exactly. My heart started pounding. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just a coincidence. So I decided to take the next exit, figuring if they followed me off the highway, I'd know for sure. The exit was coming up in about 2 miles. As I got closer, I put on my turn signal. The car behind me did the same. I took the exit, and so did they. At this point, I was genuinely terrified. The exit led to this tiny town that was completely dead at that hour. There were no other cars, no people, nothing. Just darkened storefronts and empty streets. I drove through the main street, making random turns, and the car stayed right behind me the entire time. I didn't know what to do. I thought about calling the police, but I wasn't even sure where I was or how to describe my location. Then I remembered there was a 24-hour truck stop about 15 miles north, back the way I'd come. If I could make it there, I'd at least be around other people. I found my way back to the highway on-ramp and floored it. The car behind me sped up too. I was going almost 90 miles per hour, weaving between the few cars that were on the road. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the steering wheel. The truck stop sign finally appeared, and I took the exit way too fast, nearly losing control. I pulled into the truck stop and parked directly in front of the main building where there were lights and people. The car that had been following me slowed down as it passed the entrance, and I got a clear look at it for the first time. It was the same sedan from the gas station. The car circled the parking lot once, slowly, and then left. I sat there for probably 30 minutes, just watching the exit to make sure they didn't come back. Eventually, I went inside and told one of the workers what had happened. They said it wasn't the first time they'd heard stories like that, and suggested I call the police. I did, and they took a report, but there wasn't much they could do without a license plate number. I stayed at that truck stop until sunrise before I felt safe enough to keep driving. I still do long-distance drives for work, but I'm a lot more careful about where I stop for gas now. And I never, ever ignore my gut feeling about someone watching me. That first story already has me on edge, but things are about to get even worse. This next story comes from a truck driver who encountered something on a rural highway that still haunts him to this day. Story 2. The Woman in the Road. I've been a long-haul truck driver for about 15 years now. I've seen a lot of weird stuff on the road over the years, stuff that would probably freak most people out. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to what happened to me on Highway 50 in Nevada. For those of you who don't know, Highway 50 is nicknamed the loneliest road in America, and trust me, it lives up to that name. It's a straight shot through the Nevada desert with almost nothing around for miles. You might pass through a tiny town every hour or so, but other than that, it's just you and the open road. This happened about 3 years ago. I was hauling a load from Salt Lake City to Sacramento, which meant cutting straight through Nevada. I had left Salt Lake around 6 p.m., so by the time I hit Highway 50, it was close to midnight. The road was completely empty. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. I was maybe 2 hours into the Nevada stretch when I saw something in the distance. At first, I thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or something. But as I got closer, I realized it was a person, a woman standing in the middle of the road. I slowed down and flashed my high beams, thinking maybe she was broken down and needed help. But she didn't move. She just stood there, facing me, completely still. I came to a full stop about 50 feet away and rolled down my window. "Hey, you okay?" I yelled out. No response. She didn't even acknowledge me. She was wearing this white dress that looked almost like a nightgown, and her hair was long and dark, hanging over her face. The wind was blowing pretty hard out there, but her hair and dress weren't moving at all. That's what really started to freak me out. I honked my horn a few times, hoping that would snap her out of whatever trance she was in. Still nothing. At this point, I was starting to think maybe she was on drugs or having some kind of mental breakdown. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but of course, there was no signal out there. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to just drive around her and keep going, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she might actually need help. So I put the truck in park, left the engine running, and got out. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I called out as I walked toward her. She still didn't move. I got within maybe 20 feet of her, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. She wasn't breathing. I mean, her chest wasn't rising and falling, and there was no visible breath in the cold desert air. But she was standing upright, perfectly still. I stopped walking. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get back in the truck. And then she moved. Not her whole body, just her head. She tilted it slowly to the side, like she was stretching her neck, and then she looked directly at me. I can't even describe the look on her face. It wasn't sad or angry or scared. It was just empty, like there was nothing behind her eyes. And then she smiled. Not a friendly smile, but this wide, unnatural grin that stretched way too far across her face. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran back to my truck as fast as I could. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely shift gears. I threw the truck into drive and started moving forward, steering around her. As I passed her, I looked in my side mirror. She was still standing there, in the same spot, but now she was turned, watching me drive away, and she was still smiling. I drove for another 3 hours straight without stopping. I didn't care that I needed to use the bathroom or that I was exhausted. I just wanted to get as far away from that stretch of road as possible. When I finally stopped at a truck stop in Fernley, I was still shaking. I asked some of the other drivers if they'd ever seen anything weird on Highway 50. A couple of them gave me strange looks, but one older guy just nodded and said, "You saw her too, huh?" Apparently, I wasn't the first person to encounter a woman standing in the middle of that highway. According to him, people have been reporting sightings for years, always in the same general area. Some people think it's a ghost, others think it's something else entirely. I don't know what it was, and honestly, I don't want to know. I still drive that route occasionally, but I always make sure to pass through that section during daylight hours now. And if I ever see someone standing in the middle of the road again, I'm not stopping. I don't know what's more terrifying, seeing something unexplainable or being followed by someone with bad intentions. This next story involves both. Let's get into it. Story 3, The Convoy. My boyfriend and I were moving from Arizona to North Carolina back in 2021. We'd rented a U-Haul trailer and packed up everything we owned. The plan was to drive straight through with minimal stops, switching off driving duties every few hours. It was going to be a long trip, but we were both excited about the move. Everything was fine for the first day and a half. We'd made it through Arizona and New Mexico without any issues. But things started getting weird once we hit Texas, specifically on Interstate 20 heading east. It was around 2 a.m., and I was driving while my boyfriend slept in the passenger seat. We were somewhere between Midland and Abilene, and the highway was almost completely empty. I hadn't seen another car in probably 20 minutes. Then, out of nowhere, I noticed headlights behind me. Not just one car, but 3, all traveling together in a tight formation. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe it was a family traveling together or something. But as they got closer, I noticed they were driving really close to each other, like uncomfortably close. And they were catching up to me fast. Within a minute or two, they were right behind me. The lead car pulled into the left lane like it was going to pass, but instead of speeding up, it just matched my speed and stayed next to me. The other 2 cars stayed directly behind me, boxing me in. I glanced over at the car next to me and saw the driver staring at me. Just staring, not looking at the road, just at me. I sped up a little, hoping they'd just pass and move on. But they sped up too, maintaining the exact same position. That's when I started to panic. I reached over and shook my boyfriend awake. "Babe, wake up. Something's wrong." He groaned and sat up, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" "There are 3 cars around us, and they're not passing. They're just staying with us." He looked around and immediately tensed up. What the hell? I didn't know what to do. We were in the middle of nowhere, and the next town wasn't for another 30 miles according to the GPS. I thought about pulling over, but the idea of stopping with these people around terrified me even more. My boyfriend pulled out his phone and tried calling 911, but of course, there was barely any signal out there. The call kept dropping. Meanwhile, the cars were still surrounding us, maintaining the same formation. The driver next to me was still staring. Then, the car in front of me suddenly slammed on its brakes. I had to swerve into the shoulder to avoid hitting it, and the trailer fishtailed behind us. I managed to regain control, but my heart was racing. My boyfriend was yelling something, but I couldn't process it. All I could focus on was keeping the truck steady. The 3 cars repositioned themselves around us again, this time even closer. The car next to me rolled down its window, and the driver leaned out slightly. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could hear him yelling something. It sounded like he was laughing. My boyfriend finally got through to 911 and started explaining what was happening. The operator asked for our location, and he read off the mile marker we just passed. She said she'd dispatch a highway patrol unit, but we were in such a remote area, it would take at least 15 to 20 minutes for them to reach us. 15 minutes felt like an eternity. The cars stayed with us the entire time, occasionally swerving toward us or braking suddenly, forcing me to react. It felt like a game to them, like they were trying to make us crash. Finally, I saw flashing lights in the distance behind us. The 3 cars must have seen them too, because they immediately broke formation and sped off, disappearing into the darkness ahead. The highway patrol caught up to us and pulled us over to make sure we were okay. We gave them a description of the vehicles, but honestly, it all happened so fast, I couldn't remember specific details. The officer said they'd had reports of similar incidents on that stretch of road before, groups of people harassing travelers for fun. He escorted us to the next town and suggested we stop for the night at a motel. We ended up staying there for the rest of the night. Neither of us could sleep. We just sat there, replaying everything in our heads. The next morning, we got back on the road, but we were both on edge for the rest of the trip. I still don't understand why those people targeted us. Maybe they thought it would be funny to scare someone towing a trailer. Or maybe they had worse intentions, and the cops showing up saved us from something even more horrifying. Either way, I'll never forget the feeling of being hunted on that empty highway. Sometimes the scariest part isn't what happens, but what almost happens. This next story is proof that trusting your instincts can literally save your life. Story 4. The Hitchhiker. I'm a sales rep for a medical supply company, which means I spend a lot of time driving between hospitals and clinics all over the Midwest. I've always been the type of person who follows my gut. If something feels off, I trust that feeling. That instinct probably saved my life one night in rural Missouri. This was back in 2019, late October. I had just finished a meeting in Springfield and was driving back to Kansas City. I usually take Highway 65 North, which is a pretty straightforward drive, but there was construction that night, so I got detoured onto this smaller state route. It was around 9 p.m., and the road was completely empty. No streetlights, no houses, just trees on both sides. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I saw someone standing on the side of the road up ahead, thumb out, clearly hitchhiking. As I got closer, I could see it was a man, probably in his 40s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. He had a backpack at his feet. When my headlights hit him, he stepped closer to the road and waved at me, like he was flagging me down. Now, I'm not the type of person who picks up hitchhikers. I know that probably sounds cold, but I've heard way too many horror stories. But for some reason, I actually considered it for a second. It was cold out, and he looked harmless enough. I started slowing down. And then, just as I was about to stop, I got this overwhelming feeling of dread. It hit me out of nowhere, this intense gut-level fear that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. I don't know how to explain it other than to say every fiber of my being was screaming at me to keep driving. So I did. I pressed the gas and drove past him without stopping. As I passed, I glanced in my rearview mirror, and what I saw made my stomach drop. The man wasn't waving anymore. He was just standing there, perfectly still, watching my car drive away. And even from that distance, I could tell he was smiling. I tried to shake it off and kept driving. But about 10 minutes later, I saw him again. Not a different person, the same guy, wearing the same jacket, standing on the side of the road in the exact same pose. Thumb out, backpack at his feet. That's impossible, I thought. There's no way he could have gotten ahead of me. I hadn't passed any other cars, and there were no side roads he could have taken. But there he was. This time, I didn't even slow down. I flew past him going at least 70. And just like before, when I checked my mirror, he was standing still, watching me, still smiling. My heart was pounding. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a different person who just happened to look similar. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I kept driving, and about 15 minutes later, I saw him again. Same guy, same spot on the side of the road, same everything. By this point, I was borderline panicking. I grabbed my phone to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. I decided I wasn't stopping for anything until I reached the next town. I didn't care if I ran out of gas or had to drive on a flat tire. I was not stopping on that road. The fourth time I saw him, he was different. He wasn't standing on the side of the road anymore. He was standing in the middle of it, directly in my lane, facing me. I slammed on the brakes and swerved to avoid him, my tires screeching. I missed him by inches. As I sped past, I looked in my rearview mirror one last time. He was gone. The road behind me was completely empty, like he had never been there at all. I drove in complete silence for the next hour, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I finally reached the outskirts of Kansas City and started seeing streetlights and other cars, I felt like I could breathe again. I never reported it because, honestly, what would I even say? That I saw the same man in multiple places where it was impossible for him to be? That he disappeared into thin air? No one would believe me. Hell, I'm not even sure I believe it myself. But I know what I saw. And I know that if I had stopped to pick him up that first time, I wouldn't be here to tell this story. All right, we've got one more story, and this one might be the most disturbing of them all. It involves a family road trip that turned into an absolute nightmare. Let's finish this off. Story 5. The Rest Stop. This happened to my family about 5 years ago, and we still don't talk about it. It's one of those things that's just too uncomfortable to bring up. But I think it's important that I share what happened, if only to warn other people. My parents, my younger sister, and I were driving from Virginia to Florida for a vacation. It was supposed to be a fun family trip, you know, Disney World, the beach, all that stuff. We'd been on the road for about 6 hours when my dad decided we should stop at this rest area in South Carolina to stretch our legs and use the bathroom. It was one of those big rest stops with picnic tables and vending machines, but it was pretty empty when we pulled in. There were maybe 2 or 3 other cars in the parking lot. We all got out, and my mom took my sister to the women's restroom, while my dad and I headed to the men's room. The men's room was completely empty when we walked in. My dad went into one of the stalls, and I went to the urinals. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I figured someone else had just walked in, so I didn't think much of it. But then I felt someone standing directly behind me, way too close. I turned around, and there was this man standing maybe 2 feet away, just staring at me. He was tall, probably in his 50s, with graying hair and this really intense look on his face. He didn't say anything, just stared. Can I help you?" I said, trying to sound confident, even though I was freaked out. He didn't respond. He just kept staring. I quickly finished what I was doing and moved toward the sinks. He followed me, maintaining the same distance, still not saying a word. My dad came out of the stall at that point and immediately noticed the guy. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice firm. The man finally looked away from me and turned to my dad. And then he smiled. It was the creepiest smile I've ever seen. "No problem," he said quietly, and then he just walked out of the bathroom. My dad and I exchanged looks. "Let's get out of here," he said. We walked back to the car, and my mom and sister were already waiting there. My mom looked upset. "Did you see that guy?" she asked. "What guy?" My dad said there was a man hanging around outside the women's bathroom. He tried to follow us in, but I yelled at him and he backed off. "I think it's the same guy who was parked next to us." We all looked over at the car parked next to ours. It was an old, beat-up sedan with tinted windows. And sitting in the driver's seat was the same man from the bathroom. He was watching us. My dad didn't waste any time. "Everyone get in the car, now." We piled in, and my dad started the engine. But before we could pull out, the man got out of his car and started walking toward us. My dad threw the car in reverse and backed out of the spot as fast as he could. The man stopped in the middle of the parking lot and just stood there, watching us leave. We got back on the highway, and everyone was pretty shaken up. My mom was on the phone with 911, giving them a description of the man and the location of the rest stop. The operator said they'd send someone to check it out, but I don't know if they ever found him. About 10 minutes later, my dad glanced in the rearview mirror and his face went pale. "He's following us." I turned around and looked out the back window. It was the same sedan, maybe 4 or 5 car lengths behind us. My dad sped up, and so did the sedan. He changed lanes, and the sedan changed lanes too. My mom was panicking at this point, and my sister was crying. I was trying to stay calm, but I was terrified. My dad kept driving, going way over the speed limit, but the sedan stayed with us. Finally, we saw a sign for a highway patrol station at the next exit. My dad took the exit, and so did the sedan. But as soon as we turned into the parking lot of the patrol station, the sedan sped past and disappeared down the road. We went inside and filed a report. The officer we spoke to said they'd been getting reports of a man matching that description, harassing travelers at rest stops in the area. Apparently, he'd been doing it for months, but they hadn't been able to catch him yet. We ended up staying at a hotel near the patrol station that night instead of continuing the drive. None of us wanted to get back on the highway. The next day, we finished the drive to Florida, but the trip was ruined. We barely talked about anything other than what had happened. To this day, I refuse to stop at rest stops when I'm traveling. I'd rather hold it and stop at a gas station in a populated area. And whenever I see a car following me for too long on the highway, I immediately get off at the next exit. I don't know what that man wanted, but I'm glad we never found out. And that's it for tonight's video. 5 true highway horror stories that prove sometimes the scariest encounters happen on the open road. If you've had a similar experience or a scary story you'd like to share, leave it in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more scary content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.